Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
What lurks beneath the surface? In the US alone, there are millions of caves, mines, basement, subways, sewers, and tunnels beneath our feet. But these are not benign. There is more than just darkness and claustrophobia deep below. I've seen them, and I'm sure many of you gave too. The things that lurk beneath. Stay safe and fear the dark. My dad used to be a sewer maintenance worker in LA. He would always tell me crazy stories about his job. Usually he would tell me about the weird stuff he'd find down there, like an inflated sex doll, or about just how many homeless people live under LA. However, he would occasionally tell me stranger stories, like how there were some places in the sewers they couldn't go to because it was too dangerous. And one time when he was a little drunk, he told me about a coworker who went missing in the sewer and was never found. But my dad says he and a small team of sewer vets did find his bones, and that they were broken as if someone or something was chewing on them. Hey guys, I'm this Anon. Wasn't expecting people to care about my dad's creepy story, especially on Modern X. So I'll start with some context. My dad doesn't work there anymore. In fact, he doesn't even live in California anymore. He lives in Florida now. I live in a smaller city in the Central Valley. Now, I called my dad for clarification about his time in the sewers and chatted. So I have two stories for you guys, the missing coworker one and one that actually scared the shit out of me. Story 1. So accurate to my dad, Los Angeles has the largest sewage system in the world. Some tunnels are so big you can drive a truck in them. Some are so small you have to crawl on your belly to get in. Apparently they use drones for those now. Now then, they send guys down to maintenance. They go in pairs or in groups, and everyone gets a radio, hard hat, and reflective vest. Hell, apparently there was a blockage in one of the tunnels. They usually do regular patrols to make sure they don't get this bad, but this one happened overnight. They sent 3 guys down. To get to where the blockage was, they would have to wander through those dark, smelly tunnels for about an hour from the manhole then went into, but there was a shortcut through one of the small tunnels. The 3 decided to split up. 2 who were too big to fit and would go around, and the smallest guy would slip in and get a head start on clearing the shit. Well, apparently all then fine, and they made regular radio calls to each other and the surface. When the little guy got to the source, he radioed in and said he'd start trying to clear the way. Then when radio silenced, no matter what the others would say to him. When his coworkers finally got there, the sewage was unstuck, but the guy was. They looked for him a bit, but couldn't find him. When he didn't turn up, they sent in search parties, one of which influenced my dad. While eventually they did find him a few days later. Dead, mostly a skeleton with his reflective vest and torn up clothes being how they ID him. And his bones were chewed on. Now the official story is that when he unclogged the shit, a tidal wave of shit swept him away where he drowned. And his screwed up state was due to rats and the fact that apparently things decompose quickly down there due to the bacteria. But my dad and the other guys know better. Apparently that's not what killed him. Story 2. So the things that my dad thought got the guy were homeless people. So let me explain. La has a shit ton of homeless people even back in boomer times. Most of them live in the state-mandated shantytown Skid Row. But some of them live underground or in abandoned buildings. Well, apparently they cause some problems. They can clog sewage with their stuff and damage infrastructure as they make their way around. Most of them get into the sewers not by manholes, but by literally digging their way in and out through the basement of abandoned buildings. So why does my dad think they are responsible for killing that poor maintenance worker? The hobos who live down there have it bad. There is no light and it's full of shit. It's also a labyrinth down there. Sewer workers need radios and maps to find their way around. But the homeless, well, some of them get lost and stay down there. My dad says they look horrific. They are skinny and malnourished, they are pale from lack of sunlight, and they all look diseased. Their legs are covered in dried, caked in shit and filthy, and they are covered in infected scabs. When my dad first started to work down there, we saw a few in one of the larger tunnels. As the workers were walking through, noting the location so they can inform the attorneys along the edge of the small group of normal homeless, my dad saw one of the off-putting sewer people. A more experienced coworker pointed him out and said to watch out for those ones. My dad thought the guy was just messing with him, but he realized that the normal bums were giving it a wide berth, even to the point of wading through the poo water rather than walking near it. A few years later, my dad and a buddy were doing regular maintenance in some of the deeper tunnels when they saw one of the sewer people. That's what he called them, eating the guts out of a dead dog. When they saw it, the coworker said they should head for the surface now, and began to make frantic radio calls. When they got back, the guy told my dad that some of the homeless down there were dangerous and to stay away from them. Always call them in and leave the area if he's one or something that seems suspicious. So after all that shit, I asked my dad why he didn't tell people. He only laughed and said people don't care. They are already scared of the sewers and the homeless anyway, so it didn't matter. On top of that, they could get into trouble if they started to make a big deal about it and a supervisor heard. So there you have it, X. Stay out of the sewer.
The world is made up of tunnel systems that go all the way back to Babylon. Below the Earth's surface there are tunnels, some nearer the surface and some way below the surface, very, very deep. Most of us are aware that there are tunnels that carry sewage, street water runoff and other waste either towards a water treatment plant or the ocean for removal from cities, but that's only the very first level of tunnel systems. Deeper than that are tunnels for the deep underground military bases, and a level even deeper are tunnels used by the system, specifically by the protectors. At age 5 the protector trainees will take their Scottish/York Rite vows, they will be connected to the family's familiar spirit, and then they'll have to start learning the tunnel systems. The deepest protector tunnels are very low oxygen, and there are no maps for these tunnels, the protectors have to learn them by memory. They use them to travel so that they can protect the elite they are assigned to, and escape danger from their fellow Luciferians. Underneath Texas, and connecting to Florida and California are ocean water-filled tunnels that submarines can travel through, which are used to transport children and adults in human trafficking, G. Maxwell's Terramar. These were built by the Luciferians specifically for this purpose. Elon Musk is one individual who owns boring machine companies, and these boring machines are gigantic, and are capable of melting rock to tunnel through the underground landscape. He also builds train systems underground. In some of the tunnel systems that the system uses exclusively for themselves are booby traps, located in a device that looks something like a decommissioned Poseidon missile, which is filled with biological weaponized compounds, things like smallpox and Ebola. Jesse was told as a child that they would be set off if the location was discovered. Tunnel systems are also used to hold children in cages before rituals. The majority of Jesse Chebatar's childhood Luciferian training took place in training centers and tunnels beneath Catholic churches. Cisco Wheeler concurs with Jesse that the tunnels play a major role within the Catholic Church, and that priests use them to worship Satan and conjure demons. The tunnel systems beneath the Church of St. Peter in Rockford, Illinois have walls that are literally Illuminati holy ground. They hold hundreds of years of the handprints of 5-year-old hierarchy and expendable children. Some of the Catholic Church tunnels even connect to the Masonic lodges. In the deepest tunnel systems are born and bred generations of children who never live to see the light of day. Their skin is very translucent, and their pupils are very large and black because of the scarce lighting. The system calls them the mole children, or the black-eyed children. Their main job is that they are slaves to underground giants. There have been issues with them coming up to the surface, similar to the problems divers have when surfacing too quickly, except instead of nitrogen, these individuals get too much oxygen and it can cause problems for them. In some of the tunnels that are offshoots of the breeder program locations, they would hold children in cages, and feed them spawn kills that were not acceptable for them to sell for the organ programs, as well as the expired individuals from harvesting. Cisco Wheeler reports that there are tunnels under the White House in Washington, D.C. used to bring mind-controlled slaves to rooms there for rituals. There are also tunnels beneath Scotty's Castle in Death Valley, California, and under the Getty Museum near Los Angeles. The Mormon Temple at Lake Oswego in Portland has a large programming facility in tunnels beneath it, as well the large Boeing plant in Seattle, Washington, and the ARCO Beaver Valley plant in Pennsylvania. Beneath Disneyland and near Disney World under Lake Holden in Florida are also underground programming tunnels. These are just a small sample of locations, the network is vast. There are even tunnels that extend from England to the United States. The tunnels around the world will be underneath ley lines in many cases. There is an underground city below Area 51. This location has a giant stone altar with Nephilim skulls on it. Those skulls are there for end-time rituals, which are rituals which will be done at the time that the Illuminati is ready to unveil their new world order and raise the Antichrist. There is some indication that Michael Aquino, famed Satanist and very high-level Luciferian, faked his own death and went underground to run the underground city Mars, which he calls the Mars Colony. Valhalla is in northwestern Kansas, underneath Gove County. It is a meeting place for the very highest of the ranks of the Illuminati.
As I have stated before, I live in Portland, Oregon. There is a town near the Portland area called Wilsonville. It's about a 15-minute drive from where I currently live. When I was growing up, I lived in Oregon City. I remember when I was 10 or 11, one of my friends told me about a mental hospital in a town called Wilsonville. This was the first I had ever heard of the place, the hospital, and the town. My friend told me something had happened there that was in the newspaper. He had overheard his parents talking about it over breakfast that morning. A patient had escaped from his secure room and was running loose around the hospital. The residents scrambled security around the building, trying to locate the man. Apparently, there were some patients that needed to be locked up, because they were dangerous to themselves or others. This particular man was one of those patients. He ran down the stairs of the hospital into the basement, where the boiler room and morgue were. Down under the building there was supposedly a maintenance tunnel with easy access to the building's plumbing and electrical lines. That wasn't the principal purpose of the tunnels, however. It was said the tunnels were built as a fallout shelter in case of major disaster. The longest leg of the tunnel was 3/4 of a mile long and resurfaced at a worker rehabilitation center known as the Living Enrichment Center, or LEC. The man was thought to have escaped through the tunnels to the LEC, and was still missing. I thought about that crazy patient, running loose through the woods. This story sent a chilling wave of fear slowly through my body. At the time, the LEC was run by a young charismatic couple. The compound was designed chiefly as a place of healing for troubled people. While it was a lot like a church, it wasn't built around any specific organized religion. The ideas of the place were loosely based around Buddhism and other Eastern religions. The main building had a reception lobby and on-site bookstore, connected by a long hallway dotted with small offices. There were kindergarten and grade school classrooms on one side of the building, with 100 or so lockers outside the doors. There was an indoor pool and locker rooms. There was also a cafeteria and a big kitchen, next to it a daycare center. On one end of the building there was a huge auditorium with a stage and a balcony. Outside the main building there was a covered walkway that stretched to the other side of the property. There you could stay at one of 20 so small cabins they used for retreats. There was a small stream of water that ran through the center of the property to a pond, which was surrounded by picnic tables and benches. On the far end of the pond was a wooden gazebo with a round table inside. Most of the time, the LEC was filled with people, several hundred at any given time. The place was active with community servants and volunteers, and for the most part played a role in the rehabilitation and positive outlooks of many people. They held plays and hosted motivational speakers weekly in the auditorium. People took swimming lessons. They threw parties and weekend retreats. My parents even had some friends that visited there from time to time to take a yoga class. I didn't know all these things went on there until I became an adult and did a little research. While the LEC at one time was an important place of inspiration for a lot of people, like many other places, it had a dark past. A few years after the organization took off, the young successful couple that ran the place fell into the crosshairs of the local police. Questions had begun to arise regarding back taxes and unpaid debts. It came into light that they were stealing money, several $1 million. It took a few more years for an actual conviction, but when the case broke open, so did the LEC. The front page of the newspaper suddenly showed the charismatic leaders of the organization being led away from their building in handcuffs. Edward Morrissey was locked away in a federal prison for money laundering. He confessed to their wrongdoings under the condition his wife, Mary Main Morrissey, would not see any jail time. As for their organization, things sort of fell apart from there. Regular activities abruptly halted, and the Living Enrichment Center's gears stopped moving. Betrayed, the members of the organization stopped showing up altogether, and the business itself was finished. The compound immediately shut down and was closed. To this day the place is deserted, devoid of people and completely abandoned. When I heard about this place a year ago, that familiar feeling of fear crept back into my body as I remembered the story my friend told me when I was 10. I began to research the LEC and learned about what I just told you. I talked to my parents about it and they remember the whole thing quite well. They told me everyone was shocked to learn the couple running the place was brought down. Before then they were well loved. I also looked into the mental hospital. I wanted to know if it was still there and if there really was a tunnel system running underground between the two buildings. I learned that shortly after the LEC shut down, the mental hospital coincidentally became abandoned as well, for completely unrelated reasons. To my dismay, however, I also learned the abandoned hospital was torn down a year ago to make way for a new housing development. I found websites talking about the numerous sightings and paranormal activity recorded at the abandoned hospital and how it was rated one of the most haunted places in Oregon before it was demolished. The opportunity had passed me by. Or so I thought. When I read about the tunnels, I could only find rumors about them being there, no real confirmation of their existence. Needless to say, I was intrigued. I wondered if the tunnels were there, and if they still lead underneath where the mental hospital used to be. I used Google Street View to find the exact location of the LEC, and I was on my way. I drove to Wilsonville a year ago in July with my friend, who I will call Alex, not his real name. We brought flashlights and a digital camera. The LEC's main entrances had been chained off, and the parking lot could not be used. This was an easy problem to get around. We parked about a half-mile away and entered the forest surrounding the compound. When we emerged into a clearing, we saw the hulking mass of the 95,000 square foot main building, covered with ivy and thorny bushes. The whole property was surrounded with a chain-link fence. I quickly located a hole someone had cut in the fence. We climbed through and entered the property. To our immediate right was a cluster of dilapidated cabins that stretched for a quarter-mile or so. Most of them had collapsed roofs or doors that had been long since kicked in. To the left was the giant concrete building that was once the Proud Living Enrichment Center. The place was truly scary looking. It was abandoned, for sure. Alex was getting visibly nervous, so I asked him if he would be okay to explore a little. He wanted to leave. I asked if he was sure, and after a minute or two he decided to stay. We entered the main building through a shattered glass double doorway. The entire place was a shambles. The windows were broken, the walls were spangled with graffiti, and the doors for the most part were demolished. The carpeted floor crunched underneath our footsteps with broken glass. There were beer cans and cigarette butts all over the place. It had obviously been used for some serious partying. It was vandalized to the point of condemnation. There were weird stains in the carpet and piles of garbage in some areas. Some folding chairs that had been left behind were crushed and twisted into a strange mass of metal. We walked around the entire building, taking pictures and mostly not talking. We began searching for the tunnels. While we were there, it was about 2 in the afternoon, in the middle of July. Despite being a 90-degree day, the LEC was cool and dark inside. We had our flashlights on most of the time. After an hour had gone by, we had not found any leads as to the tunnel's whereabouts. If they existed, they were well hidden. While we searched, we eventually got split up. The place was huge after all. I was in an area that looked like it had been used as commons. There were a few tables here and there and a long wheelchair ramp, as well as stairs that lead up to the main entrance a floor above. I couldn't see the main floor above me. I was looking for a maintenance door or stairs leading down. I suddenly heard a loud crash on the floor above me. The whole room was open with high ceilings, and the sound echoed through the whole building. It sounded like a heavy person had jumped from a high place and landed with a thump on the floor. I froze and listened for footsteps, but there was nothing else. I figured it was Alex messing with me, so I waited to see what he would do next. Nothing happened for a few more seconds, so I shouted to Alex to knock it off. Suddenly, Alex emerged from a room across the hallway on the same level as me. He asked me what I was shouting about. I grabbed my breath and held it for a moment. What was the noise I heard? We both ran upstairs and there was nothing there. After discussing it, we decided the place was falling apart, so it must have been a piece of the ceiling falling to the floor. While there was no debris anywhere around there, it was all we could come up with. From this point on, we decided to stick together. Alex told me he had found a hatch in a dark corner of the building, so we went to go see where it led. As we approached the hatch, I felt a little chill crawling up my spine. I could see the metal trapdoor, ajar in the next room. The room was pitch black and filled with bulky metal machines. I figured it was a boiler room or a furnace or something like that. I shined my flashlight down into the hatch and could see it lead down to a tunnel. Someone had left an old wooden ladder in the opening for people to climb down. We weren't the first people to go down there. There was a moment when Alex and I looked at each other as if to say, who goes first? I went first. This tunnel was narrow, cold, and made of concrete. Long pipes stretched as far as I could see ahead of us. We walked to the end and surfaced underneath the swimming pool. It was creepy, but not the right tunnel. It obviously didn't lead to a mental hospital. We climbed out and searched for another half hour or so, until we came across a room filled with maintenance equipment. Most of the stuff in there was totally destroyed. There was a pile of broken tools and a wheelbarrow that was rusted through. There was water dripping all over the place and puddles on the ground. I don't know what was in there, but it smelled fetid and rotten. There was a metal staircase leading down into the room, and near the bottom it was twisted and broken. We climbed down the steps and looked around with our flashlights. We didn't find anything at first, so we turned to leave, and that's when we found a small narrow passageway underneath the stairs. I could feel a chill breeze coming out of the entrance. I tried not to think about the story my friend had told me when we were kids. This time Alex went first. I could tell immediately this tunnel was different. Air gently passed through the tunnel coming from the other end. While this tunnel seemed longer than the last one we found, it was definitely narrower. I had to walk directly behind Alex, and I couldn't really see over his shoulders very well. At the beginning I was glad he had gone in first, but after a few minutes I was regretting it. I had nothing but darkness stretching endlessly behind me. I kept turning around to shine the light behind me, but after a while my flashlight couldn't reach the end. We must have walked for 10 minutes or so when Alex started to get a little nervous. He shakily asked me if we were getting close to the end, and I said I didn't know. It was cool and dry inside the tunnel. A soft breeze was constantly flowing through from the opposite end. I looked behind us again and saw nothing but darkness. It was the same ahead of us. I looked at the thick pipes that stretched as far as we could see, and there was a huge pressure gauge embedded within. I looked at the needle, which was displaying no pressure. It was then I first heard the noise. It sounded like somebody was shuffling their feet. It echoed towards us from the end we came from originally. I thought it was Alex, but it was coming from behind us. I shined my light and saw nothing. The shuffle became rhythmic footsteps, then started to sound like heavy footfalls. It sounded like someone was coming towards us. Instinctively I shoved Alex from behind. "Let's go," I said frantically, and we both started to run. Our heavy breaths and footsteps drowned out the other sounds quickly. We ran for what seemed like forever until we reached a T-shaped intersection. From the left we could see sunlight a bit further ahead, and the right was black. We waited for a few moments to listen for anything. We were both panting but trying not to make any noise. Suddenly Alex grabbed my arm and put his other hand over my mouth. We could hear distant footsteps again, this time sporadically, like someone creeping or limping along. After 3 or 4 slow steps I heard someone say, "Shoof," from the darkness. I thought I was going into shock. I was flooded with adrenaline. We turned and ran to the left, towards the sunlight. We found a concrete staircase that led to a dilapidated outbuilding on the edge of the LEC property, in the woods. We emerged into the bright afternoon. Even in broad daylight I could feel myself shaking with fear. We waited for 15 minutes for someone to come out of the tunnel, but nobody ever came out. We even came back to the exit and shouted into the tunnel, which yielded no response. On the way home we debated the chance that someone else was in there with us, but it seemed very unlikely. I have read about squatters and tweakers taking refuge in the LEC, but after being there searching for a couple hours we saw no evidence of anyone being there.
I'm gonna green text this for ease of reading, but let me give some background first. Me and my buddies are tunnel runners, meaning we like to explore tunnels, mostly just deep rain drains. I was finally able to take my brother out, so this was his first time exploring. Me, 18, leader of the tunnel runner group. Me and my bro go running in the tunnel, walk through a tunnel I frequent, get to the end and decide to explore another tunnel near the exit of this one. Get to the tunnel and find the top punched off from the inside. Note, the metal grate on top of this thing was dented as though something hit it hard from the bottom, and the entire concrete slab that was supposed to be sitting on top had popped off at the seams and slid down the side of the tunnel's entrance. Climb through the broken hole in the top. Start tagging this bit of tunnel since we hadn't been here before. Have our backs turned to a pitch black tunnel. Tunnel goes as far as we can see and there's a light shaft about 40 meters into it. My bro gets done tagging and just stares into the tunnel for a while. He turns white and tells me, I see something. I glanced into the tunnel and dismissed it since I didn't want him scared on his first run. He climbs out since he's freaked. I finish tagging. Stare into the tunnel at the light shaft. See a hand dragging on the floor. Realize something is getting closer to me. Decide to book it out of there. Ask my brother what he saw. Says it was tall, hunched over with long arms, and long black hair that covered its face. Said it was crawling closer to us when he was looking. We get out of there. I've been searching for this tunnel entrance for a few months. This is the mother of all tunnels in my area and I gotta map it out. So naturally I gotta kill this thing if it really is a cryptid. Any tips? Guns are difficult since it echoes, but not out of the question. Anyone know what it could be? It's in southern Missouri, in part of the Ozark Mountains.
Without a better description, I would have to say it's one of those crawlers you hear about. A few X-Files on here who have claimed to work at national parks have shared stories about them. Apparently they're more common than we think, and at least according to one anon. They're surprisingly fragile, although they're very quick. This is not to say that you shouldn't go in armed to the teeth, just in case. I'm just sharing what I've heard. If I were you, I would bring a good knife and hone my hand-to-hand combat skills. Have yourself a nice close contact throwdown in the tunnels.
Are they just called crawlers? Sounds very interesting. Luckily, I'm pretty good at hand-to-hand combat thanks to a knight's group where we used actual swords to fight. Think I should be prepared if I bought a couple of my machetes. Though I'd prefer to get a better weapon. Thanks for the info, man. If you read the start of this thread a couple days ago, I'm back. Sorry I let the last one archive. I just got a mechanic job and stuff's been wild. If you didn't see the first thread, here's the rundown. Basically, me and a group of buddies are tunnel runners. We like to explore tunnels, mostly just rain drains and occasionally caves. My brother got to go tunneling with me for the first time the other day and we dropped into a tunnel we hadn't seen before, but it was right next to a tunnel I frequent. After a minute, we noticed something moving deep inside the tunnels. After looking and promptly running, me and my bro traded information and came to the conclusion that it was a tall, deformed, humanoid-looking thing with super long black hair that covered most of its face. It was dragging itself along the ground towards us with its massive hand. I don't have much more information except that I was doing research and have concluded that it is not a normal crawler. Those things are incredibly common, yes, but the thing we saw was big, slow, and had hair. Common crawlers are hairless, white, and fast. The original rake photo is actually a photo of a crawler. I also figured I'd tell you that I'm not enough of an idiot to kill some homeless man by accident. I'm gonna make sure what it is and if it's hostile before I do anything aggressive to it. Who knows, maybe it's a harmless crackhead or even possibly a friendly monster. Someone said I should lure it out, which I think is a great idea if I can. I want as much information on this thing as possible, and if it truly is a cryptid, I want to prove it with photos, video evidence, etc. Anyways, I have no photos of the actual thing, but I do have photos of the nearby tunnels just to both prove that I actually explore tunnels and give you guys an idea of what we saw the thing in. Pick related, that's the tunnel I frequent that's next to the cryptid tunnel. This is the tunnel we saw the cryptid in. We didn't have boots, so we crawled in through the top to avoid getting wet. You can see the concrete opening in the back with the top popped off of it. If you didn't see the last thread, that top is dented outwards as though something hit it from the inside. If anyone has a reasonable explanation for this, I'd love to hear it. So far, the only guess I've gotten is gas buildup, but that's literally an open grate on the top and a tunnel is about 5 feet away from it, so there's no way gas buildup in there. Also, the picture looks super cinematic because I post videos of my tunneling adventures on Instagram. I had recorded this, it's a screenshot from a video. Before we dropped into the tunnel and saw the cryptid. That's my brother in the shot. It's right next to a public area. I don't plan on going alone, I'm going to be armed, I'm going to be streaming whatever it is. The odds of me dying are nearly zero. I'm smarter than that. I'm not about to sprint headlong into a tunnel with a potentially dangerous person or monster inside of it, and if I lure it out, I'm going to have a gun and be standing up on a ledge that's difficult to get along with several other armed people. I'm not going to risk much if I risk anything. I recorded into the tunnel, but this is all you can see. I just got a job and got paid, so I'm hoping to get a high-powered flashlight soon. All I have right now are crappy phone flashlights or worse. Can you see anything in that photo? 'Cause I sure can't. It's too dark. Believe me, if I could have caught it on camera I would have, but I'd need either a serious camera or a super bright light to do that. If at all possible, I would like to lure this thing out into the open and get full clear video footage of it. Here's a pic of me lowering myself into the section of tunnel where we saw the thing.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.